Hi friends, I'm Cynthia Vaughn, co-author of The Singing Book by Meribeth, Dayme, and Cynthia Vaughn, a leading group voice class, textbook, and song anthology. So I want to pick up where I left off last time about tips for teaching group voice for actors and theater majors. So I talked a lot about beginning with the story rather than the music elements. So as an example, I've chosen a song today from the singing book that I think works really well as a group song to get everybody on board with the storytelling. And it's called The Water is Wide. It's a traditional English folk song also known as Wally Wally or Oh Wally Wally. And so the text is to the first verse is the water is wide, I cannot cross o'er, but neither have I wings to fly. Build me a boat that can carry two, and both shall row, my love and I. So when you are a character or you're someone in the audience for a play or a movie, at the beginning of the story, you don't know what's happening at the end, unless you've already read the book. But we're going to assume that what's happening at the beginning is just the beginning. And so rather than take knowledge that you don't have yet about the story and the character, I would just start with what you have. So who are you and who are you speaking to? And I would say in this case, you're not the narrator, you are the person who's going through this experience, and you're probably talking to yourself. So your students may have some other ideas, and everybody gets to create their own scene and scenario. You also get to decide where you are. Are you physically at a body of water? Is there a lake or a river that you need to physically cross over? And I would say in the very beginning of the song, I would treat it as an actual location. By the end of the song, it's more of a metaphor. But I would sing this as if I were facing this obstacle and trying to figure out how to get over it. And you can fill in all the other blanks about the rest of the story. And I like this verse because it sets up two problems and one possible solution. So the water is wide. Okay, that's a problem. And you can't cross over it. You're standing there, you can see the other side, but how are you going to get across? And you're not a bird, so you don't have wings to fly. So how are you going to get across this body of water? And then you have this idea, oh, there's a boat over there. So I can take this boat and cross the water. And it's a boat that's big enough for two, so that my love and I can cross this body of water. So at this point in the class, you've already had the actors on their feet and they're moving and stretching. They've done their qigong. They've made some noises just to get the voice sort of warmed up. I don't tell them that. I just have them make sounds like gentle hums, or puppy whimpers or whatever you want to call it, and maybe some sirens. Woo! And I'd probably throw in a few lip buzzes. Again, they don't need to know exactly why, or they don't need to hear the words semi-occluded vocal tract exercises, but and just making some sounds. Getting your students on their feet and moving and stretching and making noises also achieves another practical consideration. It gets them away from their phones. So just put the phones down, we're going to move, we're going to talk about story. So the next thing I would do is have the students pair up in partners or groups of 3 students, depending on how large your class is, and have them take just the first verse of the song and recite it to each other as a monologue. And, give them like 3 or 4 minutes to do that. And then have everyone come back to their chairs or their desks. And that reminds me, if you are in a classroom where you can move the furniture a bit, I much prefer a voice class in the round or a semicircle, with the piano at one end, than desks in rows. And I have even sometimes been in a classroom that has desks in rows and just taken, gotten there early, pushed all the desks around the classroom, and then made sure that I put them back so they're ready for the next class. And usually a student or two will stay after and help you do that. But this is a chance for them now to go back to their chairs. And I would ask for volunteers, a couple of volunteers, to come up in front of the class and recite this as a monologue. And you probably get a couple of different readings, but have them do that. And then the next thing I would do is have them now look at the music, look at the sheet music, and without singing the melody yet, ask them what they notice about the melody. And if this is truly a group of non-musicians whatsoever, this is when you can take a moment and talk about what's on the page there. And so when you have the two staves of music with the little bracket, that's the right hand and left hand of the piano. And then when you get to the vocal part above that, you're going to see another stave on the top that has lyrics, and above that it has notes. And at this point, I want them to just look at kind of the general direction and length of the notes. And then we'll do a little call and response. I'd also like them to kind of follow the general direction of the notes. This is a wonderful idea that I borrowed from George Shirley at one of his workshops and master classes, which instead of just having a choir or a student just chant a text in rhythm, the water is wide, I cannot cross o'er. I hear choir directors do that quite a bit, and you just get sort of stuck in this robotic monotone sound. And so I like to get away from that anytime I can. So thank you, Mr. George Shirley. And so I would have them just imitate me. The water is wide, I cannot cross o'er. So I'm doing the right rhythm, but I'm also following the direction of the melody. And so it's already sending a signal to their brains that, okay, this note we're going to elongate, and this note's a little higher than this note, but we don't need to know exactly what note that is yet. And so I would just have them do call and response on that section. This is also a good time to point out where there are rests or pauses in the music. And sometimes, as you know, sometimes the composer doesn't give you a place to breathe, and you just have to be bold and take it and just put a check mark there in their music. In this particular arrangement, it's pretty obvious. The water is wide, breathe. And I'd point out the little squiggle that is a quarter note rest and say, when you see that, you're going to stop for a beat and you're going to take a breath there. But you're still continuing the thought, the idea. I cannot cross o'er. Now you've got another rest, another place to breathe, but this time you're probably going to need to take a little bit bigger breath, because now we've got a 4-measure phrase, and a phrase is a thought, an idea, a sentence. And neither have I wings to fly, and have everybody speak that back to me a couple of times. And going on from there, again, we've got another quarter note rest to breathe. So here we have the possible solution to the problem. Build me, and it's a little bit higher in pitch because you're getting a little excited here. Build me a boat that can carry two. Again, you've got a 4-bar or 4-measure phrase, and so you might have to take a little bit bigger breath there. And you're going to take another breath, and both shall row. So again, we're kind of calming down, getting it back closer to our speaking range, and take another breath. My love and I. And there's this hopefulness because the pitch goes up on my love and I'm part of this whole thing. So already now they're looking at the lyrics and the melody line on the page. It doesn't matter if they don't know the exact names or sounds or pitches of the notes. They're already marrying the lyrics to whatever that melody line is doing. And in just a moment, we're also going to add what Daniel Helfgott calls the third line. And Mr. Helfgott is a conductor and composer, wrote a wonderful little book called The Third Line. And it is about, the third line is all of the music that's happening in the orchestra or the piano part. But for right now, we're just doing the first and the second line. So this is a good time to ask the students, no, actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. This is when I would actually now start putting it together with the melody. And if you, the teacher, are, sitting at the piano and playing and singing, just sing and play. If you have a collaborative pianist in the classroom, have them just play the melody along with you. And I might sing, the water is wide, I cannot cross o'er, and have the students sing. And that's not very challenging because it's mid-range and they get to take a breath right in the middle of the phrase. So I would have them do that again. Breathe. Breathe. At this point, you probably have a few stragglers, or who are just hanging on to that note. And this is a good point to introduce the idea of releasing a note rather than just randomly hanging onto it for a long time. You'll probably also notice that some of the singers, some of the singers, they're in your class, they're singers, just don't quite get this concept of hanging on to a note or elongating a pitch. We don't do that when we talk. And you can point that out. When we talk, the water is wide. But when you're singing a song and the composer has a dramatic reason for you to hold that note out, then the water is wide. And they'll get the hang of it and get used to continuing that note. So then the next phrase is fun to watch because, take a breath and I'll demonstrate. And neither have I wings to fly. You probably got a few students that are fine and they can just do that all in one breath. And you probably have some other students that are breathing in the middle of the phrase, or they're, I wings to fly, and they have no more air left. Great. That gives you something as a teacher to address, so you can talk about that when you're talking about breathing in just a moment. And so go through the rest of the song and you can point out, okay, this is a little bit longer phrase. So go through that, just call and response. So they're reading the music at this point, the melody and the lyrics, and hopefully they're still all with you. So right here is a great place to address vocal technique. So this is a great place to now talk about breath and breathing for singers. And of course, that's also going to include alignment because it's all interrelated. So, but now, instead of you just starting out the voice class by saying, turn to page so-and-so, and we're going to talk about breathing and your diaphragm and your intercostals and pressure systems, and this is how it all works. And they're like, so now they have a reason to want to learn about breathing for singing, because hopefully at this point they want to be able to sing through that whole phrase. So that's how you can start to introduce some technique. So spend a little time on vocal technique. You're going to want to get really in depth like you do with your private voice students. I caution you, don't. You have the rest of the semester to keep building on the vocal technique that you're just starting with this particular class. So I mentioned the third line. This is, I think, a really good way for them to start telling what else is going on in the scene that is not evident from the melody and the lyrics. And sometimes, as you know, the accompaniment or the arrangement is telling you something different than what you're singing. And so now you're going to have your accompanist, or you're going to play. So you've got this 4-bar introduction, and you can ask them, well, you know, what is that telling you? But as you go on, you can point out that, for example, as you're singing the word wide, you can hear the water flowing, that ceaseless stream of the river. So as a singer, having that underscoring while you're holding out a whole note, it really helps, because it's just helping you spin your note along. So I think what the accompaniment here is doing is it's another character. The accompaniment is the water. It's the challenges. And I'm a big believer in an educational concept called chunking. So I really like to do that with my voice classes, where we're not going to just try to get through a whole entire song. We're going to divide this up into chunks, and just apply different ideas and aspects to that chunk of the song. And of course, as they go on, probably in the very next class, you'll be able to look at the second verse, and we're still in the same key, but now you've got, I leaned my back I leaned my back against an old oak. I thought it was a trusty tree, but first it bended and then it broke. Thus did my love prove false to me. So, now something very different is going on in the story. And notice if anything different is going on in the musical accompaniment. And if we go on from there, there's actually a key change. So you can point out to the students, talk about what a key signature is, and to always be looking for that, because there's always a dramatic reason for that key change. It's not just because the composer is like, oh, that's kind of boring, we did a couple of verses in that key, let's just change keys for the heck of it. So if it's a good composer or arranger, that key change is for a dramatic reason. And so as we go into the key change for the last verse, and there's a little interlude, piano interlude between the second verse and now the final verse. Oh, love is handsome and love is fine, pure as a jewel when first it is new. But love grows old and waxeth cold and fades away like the morning dew. So the student at that point will have the opportunity to interpret that last verse as, that's life, and I had this relationship, and I had this love, and it is no more, and it fades away like the morning dew. Or the singer, the interpreter, can decide that they're still very, very sad and heartbroken. So up to the singer to decide whether they're moving on or they're just going to stay in this grief. And sometimes the accompaniment will give you a clue. I think this accompaniment, this arrangement of this traditional song, I think it leaves it open. Oh, we're in this key now, sorry. We've got a nice major chord there, and and you just sit on that chord for 2 measures. So I think it ends on a pretty positive note. This is also a good time to talk to your students about staying in the moment, staying in the story. If you have an introduction or an interlude in the middle of a song, or like this, you have an outro, you have a postlude at the end, it is still part of the story. And so when you get to this last chord, your brain should be going, don't move, don't move, don't even think about moving. And now release. So I hope that gives you some ideas of how you can work with a song with a group of actors and theater majors and keep the focus on the story, but you're also interspersing vocal technique. Every class, you're going to find moments where you can talk about the musical elements and the mechanics and how the voice works. And then for the curious students who want to know more about that, even at this early stage, let them know that there's all the text and about how the voice works, the muscles and the anatomy, all of that is in the book, and it's up to them to skip ahead and read more about that. And some of them will be curious, and those are the students that will probably be encouraged or inspired to take some private voice lessons down the road. But right now, you're trying to meet the needs of a varied group of actors and theater majors, and your job is to keep them engaged and keep them learning. Until next time, remember, sing first, talk later. Bye.